Okay, so we're going to start up today. I already passed out exercise 109, which will be about isolating objects in Photoshop. It's kind of a critical skill that you learn, so we're going to spend a lot of time working on it. Certainly something that you'll use over and over and over again. I also want to show you a bunch of examples of assignment 102 to get your minds thinking. And I also realized that somehow I made the assignment due a day early. It's supposed to be due next Wednesday, a week from today, not next Monday. So you have an extra day. So I'm telling you all that right now. It's not due on Monday, it's due on Wednesday next week. Okay? I apologize for that. Somehow I got screwed up on my days. But you need today's lecture, and then Monday's lecture will help too. So both of those need to happen before we move on. So anyway, I'm going to show you a bunch of examples because I think examples are a great way of showing you how images can be surrealistic in Photoshop. As we go through the examples, I'll try to point out things that are critical to making these realistic. So obviously, everything that you see is fake. Somebody made it up. But the key is to trick the person who's looking at it into thinking it's actually real. And that's one of the powerful things in Photoshop that we can do, is we can combine images together. And if we do them well enough, we can get something like this where they really look like they could actually happen. And that's part of the purpose of it. Certainly some of the images that I'll show you will be on the creepier side. Some of them are just kind of funny, and some of them are bizarre, to say the least. But the key on a lot of these is the lighting conditions that are taken when you actually take the photos, matching up the lighting conditions. So if you have a strong, like in this one, it's a strong flash straight on. The backgrounds or the edges are starting to get in shadow. It's consistent here, consistent there. Two images, two different faces combined together. Not quite as good because the shadows are on opposite sides, right? So the shadow here is on the right side of the picture. The shadow on the toes is on the left side of the picture, right? If those were reversed, the two would go together much better, right? A lot of times people like this strategy where you have, a mirror is a really easy mask to create, right? You take one picture of the reflection, you take one picture of you looking into the mirror, you can mask out the mirror really easy to see one mirror versus the other mirror. But again, the reason this works is the same room, same lighting conditions, right? It's just a swap out of that particular image. This is a bizarre combination of images, but it is, again, similar lighting conditions. Therefore, the shadows are both. So the shadow of the thumb is here. The shadow of the nose is right here. That's part of what makes it work or combine together. This one's just plain creepy. There's no other way of describing it. This one's a little bit on the fake side, but it still is a combination of images. I think the background is far less successful. The shadow in the background is not that great, but it is good combination of images. I love this one because it's just kind of bizarre. But one of the things that's important to notice about this is, you know how on your toes you have the little wrinkles, right, on the knuckles? They made the wrinkles on the knuckles line up with the wrinkles on the shoes. So a lot of it is about observation about the two objects, right? There's wrinkles on the shoes. What does that look like? If I'm going to convert it into toes, how can I make those wrinkles start to match up? And that's part of what makes it on the more realistic side. Skip through that one. This one's really nicely done, very subtle, but it's in the combination of the textures and kind of how the darkness, right, forms the bottom of the lip, right, and how these various little bits of the leaf are coming through that make these two go together, right? This one seems like it would be a really easy one to do, and it's actually a lot harder than it looks in terms of how the two combine together. The pieces or the frames or the pictures in pictures are a good way of doing this. They've done a lot on this particular image with focus and focal depth. So what's in focus is in the foreground. The background image, the puzzle piece is taken away. If the background was sharp, it would be much less realistic, right? But we as our minds look at this, since the background is blurry, we kind of buy into the fact that the puzzle piece was taken out, where if it was sharp, it would be much harder to see. So you want to make sure you play with those techniques in terms of how you combine images together. Sometimes it's a combination of a drawing and a photograph and how you interact with the two. Sometimes it's just one little thing that's different. You guys see the difference? Right? The little eye. And it's seeing, like you're walking in the grocery store and you see all the carrots stacked up. Do you see that? right? What can you do to kind of play on reality a bit? This one is fantastic. Love it, right? Just the arms coming out of the toilet, but again, it's very, very nicely done. The shadow conditions are correct, which is part of why it's realistic. It's kind of fun, right? Combination of the cracking ground and skin works pretty well. I think part of the other thing that works well in this particular image is the fact that the eye itself is in color and the ground was converted to black and white. It draws your attention to the eye and kind of the creases and that sort of thing, right? Great shot. This one's not that hard to do, right? You need help to have somebody set it up so that they can take the picture. But it's a combination of an empty set of pants, right, without the feet, and then one where the pants are down around your ankles, right? You combine the two together, the empty set of pants above, right, the pants with the feet below, right? The key is keeping the folds in the pants similar, right? This one's just kind of fun, right? But it's very much doable with a combination of images, right? This one, again, has a lot to do with the lighting conditions as to part of why it's real, but they're also messing with the scale of objects, right? Which a lot of times can be a very successful way of, kind of highlighting something different or changing something. Two different images, right? This one's isolated. Part of the reason this works as well as it does is because her shadow's integrated with the background image, right? If you were doing this, you could fake the shadow in Photoshop, but we haven't really discussed faking shadows. We'll get to that later on in the semester. Probably the best strategy would be to find a white wall, photograph yourself on the white wall, cut out yourself, cut out the shadow, and then that ends up superimposing. Remember, we did blending mode, so you can blend the shadow onto the cup in the background, right? It's a good way of doing it. So it's a lot in kind of how you set it up. Again, well done in terms of how the shadows combine, right, to make this a somewhat realistic, weird image, right? Sometimes it's subtle in the reflection, right? So this is a lot like the one where it was the mirror, where you have the reflection of yourself as being older. The challenge here is finding two images that go well enough together, right? Or taking two images that go well enough together to get the kitten and the lion, right? Sometimes you have to do something where you defy gravity, right? This one is harder to do than it looks because you have to get the person who's floating not to appear like they're resting on something, right? Sometimes people try to do the flying image, and it's always tricky because the cloth, the t-shirt and stuff has to hang down over whatever it is that's supporting you, and that's part of the disappearing. But you could do this without the kid there, right, and just have yourself floating. I'll show you another example of floating in a little bit. Right. I think this one is extremely well done. Probably not something that you guys can do because you have to photograph at such high speed, but it's the combination of the milk splashes coming together with a little bit of imagery that's draped in, right? So they took the figures that are entwined, converted them into the whitish color of the milk, and then managed to sneak them in to the combination of the two images, right? Really, really well done, right? This one's just kind of fun, right? But again, it's about the lighting conditions, right? Strong light on this edge matches the mom to the baby, right? That's part of why it feels realistic, right? I just thought this one's kind of ridiculous, but it's kind of fun. Again, similar lighting conditions all the way across, and you're using those. This one doesn't have a background, so you don't have to have a background, but I think they did a nice job of kind of making the background go away and letting you focus on the little critters in their ice cream cone. Right? A little bit more on the surrealistic side, very different scale of images. Part of the reason I'm showing you such a breadth of images is because I'm trying to inspire different things. Right? If everybody does the floating person, then they're all the floating person, right? Hopefully you'll get excited about something specific and you'll try to do that. So this is a matter of combining part aquarium, part fish, part underwater photo, and part above ground photo. Right? The vase that didn't shatter with the arms that did shatter. Similar strategy here. The difference is that the shards are made of like a porcelain or something like that. And they blended the person's arms on top of that kind of porcelain. So you would have to sacrifice something and break it to get the pieces, but you get the idea. Right? I thought this one was kind of entertaining. right? And sometimes it's about how do you see reality, right? What do you see when you're going along and seeing the power lines? I had never thought of this as part of the power line thing, but it kind of works in kind of a weird, bizarre way, right? But again, lighting conditions similar across the photo, which is very, very important, right? Ironing your own clothes or ironing yourself flat, kind of entertaining perspective, right? This one is one of those mind bender ones, right, where we've got a low angle perspective that shows the ceiling, but the ceiling ends up turning into a floor, right? Same kind of thing that you can do relatively easily. It's a pretty simple mask to set these up. Right, the melting arm into the ice cream cone. Again, combining, the key is getting whatever's melted on the ground to match up color with the arm so you can blend the two together nicely. This one's too bad you can't see this one better. It's a really good combination. It's a snowy landscape outside. You'll have to look at this one on the website later on. It's a nighttime snowy landscape. It blends into the sheets. The sheets then blend black into the snow over here. So it's this really kind of cool combination of the images. Right? Laying up the wallpaper of a different time, a sunnier time. The key here is all of the stuff that's in the, so this part works nicely, obviously one in front of the other, but the person on the ladder with the scrolls, right, or the fabric, and then the fact that the image ends here and we get the old scene and we get a sense of what that. It wouldn't work as well if we just had the scene. Does that make sense? So we're trying to compose this so we have what's being taken away so that we have a sense of what that is. Oops. A little bit harder to do, but it's kind of a fun exercise nonetheless. A little bit more Photoshop work. Right? Painting in the ocean. Combination of the deck and the deck boards with the blue of the ocean. They obviously did a combination of color removal and a high saturation blue to create this effect. Right? I thought this one was pretty good. So it's somebody pulling a tarp, but the tarp ends up becoming a road. So it's this cool combination of the two and how they come together. Right? Rolling along the dirt. I thought this one was another good example of a shift in perspective. So this is like the one where we're looking at the room in two perspectives. This one we're taking the image, flopping it down, creating the cliff, and then continuing on. A lot of the reason this is as successful as it is because of the perspective that we're looking at in each of these images. Right. Another example here of the combination of winter and fall and kind of how the two come together. I love this one. It's great. Right? The floating dog on the walk. The key is, again, the lighting conditions are the same. The shadows are on the back sides, right, which is part of the balloons, which are the added piece, are part of what is really making this work. Right? A little bit more on the surrealistic side. The tricky part of this would be getting the inside of the house and kind of how that blends together and as if it were cut. Right? The converting into a liquid or something like that, you'd have to photograph the liquid. It's harder to do liquid from scratch. Right? Converting something into stone, it's relatively doable as well. Right? So these, from here on out, these are all student examples that have been done in this class. And a lot of times it's about seeing something, right? This is like you're looking in the clouds and you see Abraham Lincoln or something, right? It's that kind of a thing. You're looking in the rocks and you see the dog's head and you combine the two and push the envelope a little bit. Right? Arash does not have all these tattoos, right? He added them all. This one's just kind of creepy, but it's very, very well done. Right? Creepy too, but again, very well done. Similar lighting conditions, good job in blending things together, like the upper lip versus the lower lip, and kind of how the two of them combined. Right? This one is not the most spectacular image in the world. I think these were probably shot with a cell phone, not very great. Straight on flash. The key is that both the images were shot in the exact same light, even though they were at different times, right? And the combination of the two yields the dog's head on the pig to work really, really well together, right? So the seaming of them is well done. The image itself is not that spectacular. right? Sometimes they end up being a little bit more on the artistic side. There's nothing wrong with that, but I like to at least include some of the artistic. The dress that turns into the flower, right? Again, you can kind of see the juxtaposition of sizes and kind of the general themes. The drawing, the key there is how the frames blend together, right? Reaching into the frame. You guys saw this on the handout, right? I think this is one of the really well dones. Again, it's a picture of her against the wall, picture of the same shirt hanging on the wall, and then it's the combination of the two to get the person hanging on the wall, right? But Kem did this one several years ago. I told you I'd come back to the floating person example. This was done in the courtyard, right? Actually, I think it was done right outside the front doors against the wall. The key here is how she played with the light conditions to make this work. Okay, so she was sitting on a stool, right? One of the stools from the drafting lab. When she set up this image, she set herself slightly away from the wall so that she could cast the nice shadow. Obviously, the shadow when it cast would include, right, the shadow of the legs of the stool, right? So she set up the camera on a tripod, right? Took the picture of her sitting on the stool so that she got the shadow, right? Then she took the exact same picture with nothing there, and then only put in, right, through masking, herself and the shadow, right? And through the combination of herself and the shadow, she didn't include the stool, and that's how she got herself to float. Does that kind of make sense, right? But it's a very realistic photo because the shadows and everything match up, right? Because it was shot with the tripod next to each other. Thought this one was really well done too. Oh my God, I woke up and I have no legs, right? Same concept, tripod, same concept. It's really conceiving of how to set up the scene correctly, the composition correctly, etc. Right? Again, another one of the juxtaposition, putting the face on the hand. Same kind of concept, but the lighting conditions are the same in both images. Right? This one was kind of a creative take on playing, I guess it would be a cello. Right? So again, it's getting the people to match up, but also the fact that the shadow carries here up into the person. Right? That's part of what makes it realistic. So pay attention to light and to shadow. Right? This one's really subtle, right? But right up here is the figure in the smoke, right? Or in the steam coming off the cup of tea, right? This one you can barely see. It's worth looking at on your computers because you'll see it a little bit better. But there's a face that comes through into the bark. Very, very nicely done. Right? These ones are always kind of fun too, right? It's the profile combined with the front shot and how the two combine together. Kind of bends your mind when you look at it to see one versus the other. Right? The half drawing, half photograph. Right? Again, you have to get the setup correctly, and then it's the combination of the two that work nicely. Right? Don't be afraid to compose the scene. Right? So in this example, the scissors in the background, it's all composed very nicely, and then it's the content of the photos, the fact that you're split and that sort of thing that really work well, right? A little bit more on the creepy side, more of the Walking Dead style, but you get the idea. Combination. This one was really nicely done of the little floating glass ball in context with the little tree in it. Okay, so those are a bunch of examples. Hopefully that gives you a sense of what assignment 102 is like. Obviously, I look forward to whatever you come up with because you'll take these ideas, you'll spin it off, you'll do something different, and then before you know it, your slide will be up there in the group of students. Okay, so let me go ahead and switch over. Okay, so we're going to continue on with exercise 109. And the key part of this is we're going to isolate some objects. And if you guys remember back to exercise 104 when I sent you out to photograph, I asked you to take pictures of 5 people, right? We're going to isolate these people now. It's a great way of learning how to cut people out and then ultimately combine images together. It's also good reinforcement for how masking works. We're going to emphasize masking a lot today. But in order to do this, I do need to find some images. I didn't bring images. If you don't have your images, go on, do a Creative Commons search. So it's search.creativecommons.org, right? And it used to be really easy. You'd do a Flickr search and you'd say people walking or walking people or something like that. Unfortunately now when you type in that search term, actually I got pretty good results. Last year you type it in and all you got were Walking Dead images, right? So it's changed a little bit. There certainly are still plenty of zombie pictures, but what we're looking for, yeah, there we go. See, good. What we're looking for is a picture of a person or picture of people that includes the whole person, because it doesn't do us a lot of good to cut out somebody that's a half a person or has legs cut off or something like that. So we're looking for an image, and I already pulled up from something like this, right, where we have a nice person that we can cut out, right? Here I've got a couple. That's not too bad, right? This one is a great one to cut out. So I pre-searched for some so that I can pull them up, right? This one's pretty good. I'm going to do a couple examples that have to do with the hair because I want to show you how to cut out hair. People running tend to have the hair like that, right? This one is a good example of hair. So I'm going to do a few of these as my cutouts so that you can see the strategies that we would use. So let me go ahead. I want to save a few of these images. So I'm going to click on the little down arrow. This is on Flickr if you're using a Flickr set of images. And I'm going to go to the original size, which is whatever the largest size is. And it's going to download, right? And so let me go ahead and show in folder. And I'll take this, and I'm going to copy it to my flash drive so that I can work with it. Or to my flash drive. I need a folder for today. And I'll paste. And I'm going to download a few more. Not sure which ones I'm going to do yet. All right. So I've got a few downloaded. And I have to copy those over here really fast. Take them all. All right. Okay, so I have those images here. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up Photoshop. Remember that we have a tendency to open up the non-CS6 version. So I'm actually going to go into Adobe Design Standard CS6 and open Photoshop CS6. And once Photoshop is open, I'm going to go ahead and open the first of these images. So I'll go to File, and then Open. And let me go to 109. I'm going to look at thumbnails so I can pick. Let's pick. This one's going to be good for the starters. Okay, so I've picked this one. And the first thing that I want to do is I have plenty more photograph than I really need. All I need is the person. That's what I'm going to end up keeping. So I'm going to use what's called the crop tool. And it looks like kind of a double set of rectangles overlapping with a diagonal through it. It's the fourth tool down here. It's called the crop tool. And what I'll do is I'm going to narrow the picture so that I have just the person like that. And then when I'm done, I can either press the return key on the keyboard, or excuse me, the enter key on the keyboard, or the checkbox here. And then I get just the person, right? So I got rid of the extra parts of the image. And now I'll press Control-0, and I can see a little bit more zoomed in. Looks like the quality of the image is not very high, so I'm actually going to pick a different image. If you get to the point where you have a pixelated image when you zoom in, see how it ends up being pixelated? You're not going to get a good enough result, so move on, pick a different image. Let me go to Open. I'll try this one. Yeah, much better. I can zoom in a bit, and I don't get pixels until I'm really close. So that'll work. So I'll press Control 0 to see everything. OK, so now I have a variety of techniques for actually isolating the object or the person. OK, one of the things that happens in Photoshop very frequently is when I first open an image, I end up with a locked background layer. And you can see that over in your Layers tab. It's italicized, and it has a little lock next to it. In order to get rid of that, I can right-click on it and say Layer from Background. And it will no longer be background. It'll be an active layer that we can work on. Okay? So I now have that. So as we go through and we look at different strategies for how you would isolate an object, the simplest strategy is to use the eraser, right, which is over here, and to erase around my object. And you can see as I erase, I get that checkerboard pattern. Okay? And so if I were to zoom in, for example, right, and I could come right along here, and I could erase right along the edge like that. Right? The problem is that as I'm going along, it's very, very easy to, oops, right, and delete the wrong thing, in which case the only option I have right now is to step backward. So I can go to step backward and get back to where I was. Right? But if I've been working for a long time and I do that, it's not the ideal thing to do. There are, however, some other eraser tools hidden underneath the eraser. So if I click and hold on the eraser, I can select something called the background eraser tool. And the background eraser tool works by especially well when we have a strong contrast between two edges. So down here, I've got the blue jeans in contrast to the white snow. Right? What the background eraser does is it says, let me sample a background color, and I'm only going to erase that color when I come across a contrast. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key when I do this, and I'm going to sample a color. Right? It's kind of a whitish color. And then when I go to erase, you see that it's only erasing the white color. Even though I'm overlapping the blue on my object, it's only erasing the white. Right? So the tolerance here is set to 50%. The larger this number is, the more related colors to the white that I picked it will erase. So this works really well in this context because I have blue against white. Right? If I came up here, right, and I had kind of this muted color, and I tried to do it, go to Alt, and I tried to erase. See how? Let me zoom in a little bit so you can see this a little bit better. Right there. Let me step back here. Okay. So I'm going to sample kind of this kind of brownish color. And as I go in here to erase, that brownish color is very close to the edge of this plaid shirt. Right? So as I come in here to erase, it actually erases a bit of the shirt itself. Right? So it doesn't work that well in this context. So the key with the background eraser is it works great when you have an area like this, strong contrast. If you don't have the area, it doesn't work as well. So generally, it's a combination of a background eraser. Right? Let me sample from here. Right? Oops, too much. Right? And a regular eraser, which we can flip back to. The third option is called the magic eraser. And what the magic eraser does is it tries to determine, right, what's close to your object. Right? So there it is. It did a pretty good job with that contrast. Right? As I click, we'll see, yeah, it did pretty well at kind of determining what it thinks you'll want to erase. And it's just a matter of clicking on that section, and it'll try to erase all of the part of that object that matches up with it. So it's not bad. Okay? If I go back to Control 0, right, I did OK. We'll get rid of a little bit more. And again, I'm using this magic eraser to try to do it. Right? Much harder when we get up here. Right? And what ends up happening is I end up with this kind of an image where I have kind of an isolated object, but there's a lot of extra stuff that's showing up along the edges. Right? And if I were to, this is just to show you, if I were to throw a layer that is black against it, you'll be able to see this a little bit better. You don't have to follow me doing this, but I just wanted to be able to show you on the screen. So you see that it did a pretty good job of isolating parts of the object, but there's a lot of fragments of stuff left over. Right? So I could continue on here with the magic eraser or the background eraser, and we could try to erase a little bit more of it. Like that. So it's not bad. right? But in reality, I'm going to have to come in with the regular eraser and do some cleanup. I'm going to use the bracket key to make my eraser bigger, and we'll just erase a little bit more here. And do some cleanup. Oops, lost a little of his head there. Anyway, you guys don't need to watch me do this whole thing, right? Something like that, right? And I have the person. It's reasonable, okay? But it's not the best. And so I want to show you the best way of doing it, okay? So this is a good approximation. The problem is that, like, I lost a little bit of his head there. And if I really look at this edge, see how jagged the edge is? Let me switch to a pointer here. See how jagged this edge is there, right? It's just not the cleanest in the world. Okay, so let me step back. Actually, I'm just going to close this and reopen it. All right, and I'll go back to the crop, and I'm going to show you a slightly different way of doing it. And that is that instead of just erasing the background, we're going to use a mask, a layer mask, like we did last class, to be able to go back and forth, right? And if we delete a little too much, we can get it back. So I'm going to do it instead with what's called a selection. So let me go ahead and say layer from background, so I have a live layer. And then I'm going to make a selection, and I'm going to use one of the select tools. So in terms of how you do this, there is a tutorial written up. All of these are written up. I should have referenced those earlier. If we go to Photoshop, starting at 1.13 Refined Edge, there's background eraser, quick masks, and max via paths. Both of these two, 1.15 and 1.16, are a little bit more of an advanced strategy. You'll be a lot better at these once we get through Illustrator, because we use the pen tool, and you'll understand the pen tool a lot better once we get there. So I'm going to instead focus on 1.13, the Refined Edge, along with the basic selection. So this is what I would follow along with if you want to follow with the tutorial itself. OK, so I've done my crop, so I'm down here. Let me press Control-0 so I can zoom in on this a little bit more, and do Control+. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, right underneath the magic wand tool, is something called the Quick Selection tool. Right? And it looks like a brush with a little selection. And what the Quick Selection tool does is it looks for edges and contrasts and tries to help you make a selection. Right? So as I move my brush along here, you can see that it tries to build a little selection. Right? The nice thing about it, if we zoom in here, see how I lost the tip of the shoe there? Right? It got a little bit lost. If I hold down the Alt key, my quick selection switches from adding to subtracting. So see how the center of my circle changes from a plus to a minus when I hold down the Control key? Right? The other thing is I can change the brush size. So I'll use the bracket key and make this a little bit smaller. I'll hold down the Alt key, right? And I'll drag out a little bit more so that I don't include the top of the shoe. If I went a little bit too far, I can push it in a little bit. And so you'll get used to how this works. Right? Let me make this a little bit bigger, right? And we're going to continue adding to the selection. Right? I'm going to work up in between. Oh, I lost the bottom of the shoe there. Bracket a little bit smaller. Hold down the Alt key. And no, I did want that shoe back. There it is. So it's a really good way of fine-tuning the selection. Right? And so let's continue up in between the legs here. All right, not bad. Let's come over here. Need to select more. Looks like I lost part of the shoe. So I'm going to go back with my Alt key, add back in that shoe. Right? Looks like that should go away, so we'll add a little bit there. And so you can kind of see how I can work my way through the selection relatively easily. Oops. So we'll continue our way up. Right? Now, I can also make the bracket really small. And I can select that inner part. Right? I went a little bit too far. I'll hold down Alt and I'll subtract a little bit more. There we go. We'll continue up. Looks like I need to subtract that part off there. All right, we'll add 2. Let me make my brush bigger. Oops, wrong direction. There we go. And subtract this off. So again, it's just a combination of the Alt key as we work our way around. So I lost part of his face. Get that part back. Part of the coat there. That a little bit less in there, a little bit less right along there. All right, looks like I have one little dot right there. Take that too. Okay, so now if I press Control 0, we can see that I have a selection. I have the little marching ants that go all the way around the outside of this person. Okay. This is actually a fairly reasonable mask to begin with. There's not a lot of flaring hair or anything that's very challenging to cut out. So I might not have to do the refine edge, but I want to walk through the refine edge anyway, and I'll show you a few of the spots where the refine edge might be helpful. Okay, I can go up to my select menu, and I can go to refine edge, and this brings up this little refine edge dialog box. Let me zoom in on his head a little bit, because that's probably where we're going to spend our time. Right? Let me go to, again, select Refine Edge. Right? It brings up the Refine Edge dialog box. Now, the top option here is called View Mode. And the View Mode helps you see what it is you're cutting out. Right? And so the marching ants is what we've been looking at, where we have the little dotted line that's moving. If we go to Overlay Mode, we can see kind of a red ghosted image of what we're cutting out. And so when I go to that Overlay Mode, you see how I'm missing that little edge right there? Right? If I go to On Black, we can see, right, even a higher contrast image of what? There's a little problem right there. Right? If we do On White, it's essentially the same thing. Black and white kind of shows the edge a little bit better. Right? The layers don't do too much. So I like this Overlay Mode. That tends to be the one I work in the most, but I'll switch between them. Okay? Under Edge Detection, we want it to be kind of a fine grain edge, so we'll leave it at 0.0. Under the Adjust Edge, we're going to change these values. The first one is Smoothing is going to be set to 3, and Feather is going to be 0.3. Right? And so once we have that, what I'm going to do with this dialog box open is I'm going to shrink my brush down, I hope. Right? And I'm going to paint over, right, areas. And when I paint over it, see how it corrected that little edge? Right? I'm going to come up here along his head, and actually let me make my brush even a little bit smaller. And I'm going to paint right along the edge of his hair. And if I switch my view mode now into the on black, you see that it did a much better job of isolating the hair. Okay? It looks like we need to subtract that piece, so I'll hold down Alt, right, and get rid of that piece there. Oops, didn't help me. We may have to go back and fix that after the fact. So once I'm done with the refine edge, this one isn't too big of a deal. I'll show you one with hair where it makes a much bigger difference in just a second. I'll go ahead and say OK, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, with the layer selected here and my selection still active, I'm going to come down here and select the Add Layer Mask. Right? And when I click on Add Layer Mask, it's going to create, oops, it's the opposite of what I wanted. Right? Let me go up to Select Inverse. Right? I need to select the person, not the background. My mistake. And then I'll click on the Add Layer Mask button, which is a rectangle with a circle in it. And when I do that, it gets rid of everything in the background, right, and keeps everything in the foreground. Okay? So as I said before, I had an error, right here. See where I have background showing through? I have the checkerboard, right? I want that back. Because I created with a mask, right, I can use the paintbrush with white as my color. Make this smaller, right? On the mask itself, I can paint back in, right, the solid piece. Like that. So I can actually fix it after the fact. So if I find something that I don't like right there on that edge, right, we can fill back in the edge of the person. So this is a much better strategy for actually cutting out the person. Right? We've got a little bit of feathering in the hair, which is important. That's how hair works. So I'll go ahead and go to Control 0, and now I have the person isolated right, in color. So what I need to do is I need to save 3 versions of this image. So I'll go to File, Save for Web. And if I choose JPEG, notice it puts in a white background for me. I don't want there to be a white background. I want it to be a transparent background. So instead of JPEG, I'm going to pick PNG24. And when I pick PNG24, oops, right there, see how the checkerboard comes back? Right? That's what I want. I want a transparent background. So I'll go ahead and I'll click on Save. And this is going to be man standing. And I'm going to append underscore color to this one because it's the color version. So I'll go ahead and click Save. Now, the purpose of isolating these people is that when you ultimately are doing some kind of an architectural collage or doing a building elevation or something and you want some people, if you've already created the people, it's really easy to put lots of people in a drawing. Right? If you haven't created the people yet, chances are you'll leave the people out and then you'll go into the review and some reviewer will come in and say, man, it'd be really nice if there were some people so I could understand what the scale of the building was. Right? So I'm trying to save you that down the road by making all these people. The good news for you is that there's been many, many classes before you that have done this exact thing. If you go to Resources, Collage Images, right? There's a bunch of isolated people, animals, objects, landscape object, trees, buildings, stuff. Right? People is probably the most valuable. If we click on more people, right, we can get female people, we can get male people, right? We can look at the index of how people are moving by a certain action, etc. Right? And so you can use any one of these. They're all ready for you, but you're going to contribute to it and make some more today. Right? So this is something that I did when I was in grad school. I spent a day and I cut out a bunch of people, and then I can't tell you how valuable it was to always be able to throw people in your drawings. Okay? So we're doing essentially the same thing. So to help that, we have a color version, we're going to build a black and white version, and we're going to build a silhouette. So the first one is the color. I just saved it. The black and white version, we're going to do an adjustment layer, just as we've done for black and white. So I'll go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer. Right? It was a channel mixer. Remember, I checked the box for monochrome, and then I looked at the presets to see if there was one that worked better than the others. Right? So depending on which one looked right to you, right, depends on if you want his shirt to be really noticeable or not. So anyway, let's say I like this one the best. Now I'll go to File, Save for Web again. Remember, it has to be a PNG24, so I get the transparent background. I'll go ahead and click on Save. Right? It's going to be the man standing, but instead of color, it's going to be BW for black and white. I'll go ahead and click Save. And the last one is we want to create a silhouette. And so the easiest way, because we already have a mask to create a silhouette, is to create a new layer. So let me just go to New Layer. This is just a blank layer. And I'm going to paint with the paintbrush the layer with, you could do it in black. I prefer personally a 75% gray because it's kind of a neutral gray. And it's not too black. So I do, on CMYK, we'll talk about color space a little bit later in the course. K is black value. So if I have zeros everywhere else and I have 75% black, I get a 75% neutral gray. I'll go ahead and say OK. And then I'll paint in this layer with gray. Right? I could also use the fill, which is underneath the gradient tool. I could use the paint bucket and fill it with gray. Just different strategies for how you do it. Okay? So I already have the mask over here. We already created it. All I have to do is hold down the Alt key and drag the mask from this layer to that layer, and suddenly I'll have a silhouette cut out. So it's really easy because I created it with a mask, which is the big value in masks, is that we can copy these from layer to layer. So this person is now cut out as a silhouette in gray. I'm going to save that one as well. So I'll go to File, Save for Web, and we'll save this one again. Again, it's PNG24, and this time it's going to be the man standing, but it's going to be gray. I would say silhouette, but I can't spell silhouette, so we're going to just call it gray. All right. So now let me go ahead and repeat the process, but I'm going to do it with a little bit more challenging image. And the easiest way to demonstrate that is to do something with somebody running, because generally when we look at somebody running, we get this kind of hair, right? And that hair is very difficult to isolate, right? If I were working, and I'm really going to focus for right now just on the hair, because that's the part I really want to show you the difficulties in it. Okay? If I were to go in and do what we were doing with the eraser tool, right? No matter how fine I made that brush, let me zoom in a little bit more. No matter how fine I made that brush, it'd be really hard to get around every one of these little pieces of hair and to have it work. You know, even if I kept making the brush smaller, right, and tried to erase, it's a huge amount of work. So I'm not going to do it that way, right? What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to use my selection tools and my refine edge tools. So I'm going to right-click on background and say layer from background, so I have a working layer to actually work with. Okay, so it's unlocked, and now I can work on it. Okay, so next I need to start to create my selection. And actually, let me go Control-0, and let's go ahead and do a crop so that we get rid of her friend here. Like that, and like that. All right, so I'll go ahead and hit Enter to finish that, and then let's go ahead and zoom in once again as we do the selection. All right, let me one out. Perfect. So now I'm going to use this quick selection tool just like we did before. Right? Remember, it's hidden underneath the magic wand tool. I'll use quick selection. Right? Oops. And my brush is way too small. Let me make my brush bigger. Sorry, like that. And we're going to work our way around her. Right? Notice that the hair, it's kind of created the bulk of the hair there. Right? And I'll continue working my way around. Right? We have to do this part, do that part. I can hold down spacebar, by the way, to pan. Right? And I'll work my way around. Looks like I lost part of the shoe, so I'll hold down Alt to get that part of the shoe back. Right? Again, it's that combination of the two. Go up. Oops, I lost the leg. No. I'm going to change my brush size down. Just not playing nice, is it? All right, well, we're going to have to get her leg back this way. Alt. All right, well, anyway, I want to focus on the head. All right, so let me come back up here. So now I'm going to work on the refine edge. So I'll go up to my select, and I'm going to go to refine edge. Okay? And if we look at her head and her hair, notice in my view mode where I have black or white, we can really see that it's kind of a hard outline, and the hair just doesn't look very good. Okay? Instead of that, right, I'm going to switch over to overlay so I can see through a little bit. And then I'm going to change these settings. So again, the radius is going to be set at 0, 0. The smoothing is going to be set to 3. And the feather is going to be set to 0.3. Right? And let me make my brush a little bit bigger. Come on. There we go. And I'm going to zoom in slightly. All right. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint over the edge here where the hair is. So I'll paint over it like that. And we can see that it's no longer this sharp object anymore. Now I'm going all the way in to her hair because I want to identify these little holes that are in the hair. So we'll work our way around. I have to paint all the way up into here. All right, so if I switch into my black, see how I used to have a very sharp black outline, but now we're starting to see more of the hair and more of the feathering of the hair. if in reality when we shoot a photo of somebody and we see the hair and we see the color through the hair, what the photo is doing is the hair is slightly distorting the color as it comes through, but it is semi-transparent. It's not really an individual strand that's cut out, right? So we're letting a little bit of the color come through and we're letting the hair modulate the color. So let me switch back to this overlay mode and we'll continue along. All right, and I'm working on the hair as it goes through here. Right? And it's really starting to highlight that hair nicely. We can see it there. And if we were to go into our view mode and look at on black, see how I'm seeing all of those little individual hairs now where I wasn't seeing that before? That's exactly what we're after. Let me hold down Alt for a second, and I want to subtract out that a little bit more. All right, I may have to fix that edge a little bit as we go forward. Yeah, that looks pretty good, pretty good. All right. So again, I'm focused on just her head right now, so let me Control minus, right, and we're back to there. Now, once I say OK, right, I go back to just having the selection. Okay? It's when I create the mask. Oops, sorry, I have to do the inverse. I always forget. Select, inverse, and I create the mask. There it is. That we actually can look, right, at what the hair does and see how the semi-transparent through all of those little individual wisps of hair. That's the key to being able to cut this out, right? Looks like maybe I have a little bit too much, right, in here that I didn't get, so I can come back with my paintbrush, right, and the color white, make this a little bit smaller, and we can solidify a little bit of this edge in there. Okay. Let me flip my color. Take that out a little bit. There. So now that we have this identified, I'll press Control 0 so we can see everything. Right. Again, I didn't cut her all the way out. But if I were to save this, I go to File, Save for Web. Right. Again, making sure it's a PNG 24. This is a higher resolution image, so it takes a little bit longer. There we go. And I go ahead and click Save. Then I convert to black and white. So I go to my layer, New Adjustment Layer, and this would be a channel mixer. OK. And I'm going to change this to be monochrome with some kind of a black and white filter, depending on what it is that I want it to be, something like that. Then I'd save that as well. And then the last thing that I'm going to do is do that plain gray layer. So let me go to create a new layer. And let me go to my paintbrush. It already is set to a 75% gray, 00075 in the K value. And we'll go ahead and paint this. Oops, let me make this bigger so I don't have to spend so much time. Okay. Then I hold down Alt on my mask, drag the mask from one layer to the other, and I end up with the cutout. When we do the cutout is when you can really see that the hair looks realistic. Right? It's a good way of showing that. Okay? So I'll do this whole thing one more time. And I know you guys are probably bored of hearing me talk, but I'm just trying to help reiterate these points. Let me go to File and Open, and I'll pick this one. Right? Another good combination. What I want to do is do the crop first. So there's crop. Pull this a little bit smaller. Pull that a little bit smaller. Like that. I'll go ahead and say OK. And now I need to go through, again, with my quick selection. All right, too much. Hold down Alt. All right, too much. Bracket key makes this smaller. Hold down Alt to subtract. Add that back. So it takes a little bit of time. I'm just trying to get the general outline of her hair. All right, so we end up like this, right? Reasonably close. All right, then I'm going to go to the Refine Edge. So I'll go up to Select, Refine Edge. Right, and this is when I can really see what's going on. Let me go ahead and go to the Overlay mode. Right, and again, I'm going to set these values for 3 and 0.3. I'm going to zoom in, Control plus, and I'm going to go right along the outside edge of her hair. I want to look at the marching ants really fast. Okay, it looks like I have to come up in here a little bit. So I'm going to come up in there a little bit. Right, I want to take a little bit out of that. A little bit right in there. A little bit right in there. So I'm looking for any places that would be somewhat transparent. If I go back to my overlay mode, right, we're looking pretty good. I'm going to spend a little bit more time looking at the edges of things. Looks like I skipped this. Right, so let's go ahead and see if I can't refine that edge a little bit better as well. I may have to come in and deal with that after the fact. Let me do this edge there. Right, reasonable. So I'm just working my way around her. Through. A little bit right there. All right, looks pretty good. Once I'm done, I'll go ahead and say OK. Then I'm going to go to Select, Inverse. I'll press Control 0 so we can see the whole thing. And then I'm going to do a layer from background because it's locked. If I were to try to create the layer mask right now, oh, it looks like it would create it for me. So we're in good shape. So I went ahead. I have the layer mask that's there. Looks like there's a few little things that need adjustments, like I missed that. So let me go ahead. On my mask, I'm going to paint with black. Too big of a brush, right, to get rid of that. And we'll take a quick look at her and make sure everything looks okay. Probably needs a little bit of refinement right there in the purse. So let me paint with white. Right, and this is one of the really good advantages to working with a mask is if you make a mistake, you can come back and get using the mask. Or get rid of, use a hard edge here, whatever it is that you missed, you can get back. So I'm just going to refine this up a little bit. All right, so she looks pretty good. I'll press Control 0. Right, there she is. I'm going to save the color version, so I'll go to File, Save for Web. Again, PNG 24. I'll go ahead and click Save. I tried to give them somewhat descriptive names. All right, then I'm going to convert her to black and white, so I'll go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and I will go to Channel Mixer. Say OK. This is going to be monochrome, right? And we'll look and see if one of these does a little bit better job. Right, that one's not bad. I'll go ahead and go to File, Save for Web. Click on Save. And this is going to be black and white. Click Save. And then the last one is going to be that gray. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'll paint it with gray. I'll go to Paintbrush. Gray is already set for me. Go to Paint. There we go. And then I'll click on my mask, hold down the Alt key, and drag it on top of my layer to get just the silhouette. Okay? And so now I'll go ahead and go to File, Save for Web. And this is going to be gray, so I'll go to File, Save. And this is gray. And I'll go ahead and click on Save. Okay? So now I've done, and I've created those. You're going to do 5 people or objects. I think I say 10 in the sheet. I'll give you a break and give you only 5. You can choose to do people. You can choose to do trees or whatever seems appropriate to you. But you need to do 5 of them today and post them. When you go to post them, right, I'm going to go to New Post. Right, I'm going to describe it here. So this is a woman with book. And then I could say something like that. When I click on Add Media, I'm going to upload all 3 files. So I'll select Files, and I'm going to upload all 3. I can hold down Shift and say Open. It will upload all 3. And once I have all 3, I'm going to just click on Insert into Post. All 3 of them are checked, which means I'll get all 3 of them into the post. Right, there they are, 1, 2, and 3. If I go back to Set Featured Image, I'm going to set the color image as the featured image. So I already uploaded it, so I don't have to do it, and it'll show up as the featured image here in just a second. All right, there it is as the featured image. Now, as I come up here on the right side, in order to keep things organized and to have your stuff show up when somebody's looking for, say, a person, there's something called Collage Images. Right? It's below your normal categories. It's called Collage Images. And under Collage Images, I want to come down here and try to categorize who this is. All right, so let's see here. This is a female, right? We could say it's a lady. We could say it's a woman, right? And let's see here. This would be under the broad category of people. All right. In terms of action, is she doing anything? Right? She's not really doing anything, so we'll just leave her, right? All right, so that's probably enough of the categories. I'm going to come back up here and make sure that we're categorized this as 135, and it is an exercise, and it is 109. Right? Once I have those things set, I have my 3 images in the post. I'm going to go ahead and publish this particular post. You're going to do a separate post for each of your 5. So you'll do 5 posts today. All right, and then once that's done, right, let's go back to the site. All right, if I go to Resources and I go to Collage Images, and I go to People, right, these are organized by the most popular ones, but I'm going to go into the More Females, right, and I'm still not within the popular group because I just posted it, but if I click on View All Females, the most recent post is mine. Okay, so I categorized it correctly. If somebody wanted this, they could click on it, right, and then they can right-click on the image itself and say Save Link As, and save it as a PNG. Okay, so the idea is that they're all there. Feel free to go ahead and download any of these. That's what they're there for. You can use them at any point in time. Are there any questions? No? All right, I'll turn you loose.